On this week's episode of Where's the Nuance, I was joined by Nic Patiño. He's the creator of the self-expansion method, the master of the gene keys, and empowerment coach whose own work and life story dives into the depths of the darkness to help us unlock our highest potential. In this conversation, we discuss what the gene keys are, how they clarify the secrets of our deepest potential, and we discuss the universal principles that tie the spiritual traditions and the gene keys together. Nic also shared with me his inspiring and personal story that covers some tragic loss, finding redemption through love, and his journey towards mastery. I also shared a little bit more about my own personal story, and we connected over a deep and shared value around personal responsibility in the face of adversity. This was truly an enlightening conversation with an amazing human, Nic Patiño.
All
Enjoy.
right, Nic Patiño, thank you so much for joining me on Where's the Nuance? How are you?
Well, I'm better now that you said my last name properly, even though most of the time I don't include the Ñ over the N.
Of
I love
course.
when people pick that up and say Patiño with the
Patiño.
richness
What
of the
kind of a
culture.
Niño would I be if I didn't recognize the other Enya in the room? So, Nick, obviously, anyone who's listening, Nick is a coach, a mentor, bit of a spiritual and mindset guru in a lot of ways. And a lot of your work dives into something that you refer to as the gene keys. And I think that's kind of, I think, the basis of a lot of how you understand your application, your coaching, and all that. And I'm super ignorant, so let's start from a place of ignorance. Let's assume my audience is as ignorant as me because that's what I think of them. What is the gene keys? What is this thing that you are talking about out there that you're sharing? What is this? What is it?
I love that you're cutting right to the right to the meat and potatoes of
I
this.
really want to know.
The gene keys is such a fascinating and truly an endless journey that you can embark on. It's not just another personality assessment. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and that's why I take to it so much. A lot of my work resonates very deeply with deconstructing concepts and knowledge in favor of wisdom and embodiment and things where you unify all of the versions of yourself that you feel are so separate, like the mind and the body and the emotions, and pursue a state where you no longer feel like you have to constantly be roping everything together into like a cohesive identity, whatever you think that might be. And so the gene keys is a way to return to the basics and to discover universal truths. I in everything that I do try to pursue the fundamental truth beneath like the layers of concepts and rationale that you can pile on top of it. I kind of started reading a lot of philosophy, and I stopped reading ancient philosophy because it's really just such a silly network of rationalization that loses touch with what really matters about life, which is enjoying it and not asking so many endless unanswerable questions. And so the gene keys is not a book that you read in order to acquire knowledge. It's actually a collection of books, but more than anything, it is a living wisdom. If you've listened to anything that the creator of the books of the gene keys has said, you'd likely hear him talk about how the Tibetans have a great word for this called Dhamma, which is to kind of describe information as not a collection of things that humans have created, but another being that has manifest not in a human experience, but as a information experience, or really as a primary experience, an experience of experience, a direct archetypal story arc. And so the gene keys is a collection of 64 archetypes or story arcs in which you start in the darkness. There is a shadow that you must face and eventually embrace so as to make it through the shadow and unlock the gift hidden within the opportunity of that challenge, and eventually perhaps transcend it and enter the third state of the story, in which you access the enlightened frequency or the city.
Wow. That's a hell of a trip, my man. So essentially, if I can dumb it down for people like myself and others, there is some kind of experiential truth that you can come to, and this thing is often blocked by the ideas that we hold around information and even around ourself. And there is a kind of shadow of the self that we have to confront, not unlike, I think, maybe the Jungian concept of the shadow, the darker aspects of our consciousness that we're not made aware of. And it is through the confrontation of these things that you move towards an enlightened state. And again, I guess these terms are used a little bit loosely because, like you said, it's not so much to describe like a dogmatic idea of what enlightenment means, but rather just like a true embodiment of the potential that I guess each individual holds. Yes.
Precisely. And we're already cutting into the nuance. But yeah, to simplify it, we walk through life with so many questions, and generally they revolve around how can I actualize my desires? How can I fulfill myself? How can I serve the world? How can I create a legacy? Essentially, what is my purpose?
Yeah.
What is my purpose? What is my purpose in service, in my work, in my professional life, or in my connections? Like, am I fulfilled by my relationships, and am I of service to my community? These kinds of questions can haunt us, and they can lead us. I mean, I would bet that both of you and I began our seeking a little bit more comfort and perhaps even some answers with these questions. And the truth is that when you're living your purpose, when you have these answers, you don't actually have an answer. You don't have any kind of certainty. You don't have any kind of clarity. What you have is the type of harmony that allows you to make peace with wherever you are in the distance between you and what you might imagine your purpose is. And you are comfortable and at peace there. And so no matter what the shadows you're experiencing are, they are part of your purpose. And when your purpose is whatever you confront in each moment, well, then you're fulfilling your purpose, and those questions dissolve entirely.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Obviously, I am devotionally attuned to that idea, and I'm fundamentally always like, it's funny you say that. I think yesterday I posted the video around purpose where I said, we keep asking these questions around purpose, but it's the very asking of the question that takes you away from the possibility of embodying what purpose really is. And, personally, I prescribe myself a little bit to the philosophies around Kriya yoga, but which are very supplemental to any belief system because it's not a rigid or dogmatic way of seeing the world. But Kriya yoga very much perpetuates that kind of idea that like it really is in the surrendering and in attuning yourself to spiritual awareness that you find these things. You find these things. Tell me a little bit
more about Kriya and how it connects what your experience has been, because I honestly don't know that much.
Kriya yoga it's an ancient science of yoga that was a meditative science that was passed on from the lineage of Lahiri Maharaj. Well, from a saint-like figure called Babaji, who in this scriptures is pretty much like a Jesus type Indian figure who is a messianic figure who roams India. He's been around since 200 AD, and he has this science it's a knowledge of how we can access the life force that constructs this material reality around us. And in the highest of beings, these beings can materialize at more than one place. They have Jesus-like type powers, walk on water, all that kind of stuff. But
that would be the enlightened beings who, from the Gene Keys perspective, access the Siddhic frequency.
There you go. Yeah. So, and this is the Kriya yoga practice is very much a meditative practice, also a lifestyle in many ways, because it always, one of the fundamental things that my teacher Ryan Kurzak is teaching me, who's he's under the same lineage of Babaji, Lahiri Maharshi, Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda, Roy Eugene Davis, Ryan Kurzak, and now I'm kind of like learning through his Patreon, which is super cool.
Sri Ramana Maharshi?
No, not Sri Rami Maharshi. Sri Yukteswar. I think Sri Rami Maharshi. It might be a different lineage, but a lot of people practice Kriya. This is just, there's different lineages that break off depending on what teacher you ended up going with. But the essence of it is
these thousands of years.
It can get a little bit messy. But the fundamental thing is if you practice these kind of meditative practices and you stick to these principles outlined in the Bhagavad Gita, in the pretty much living in truth, integrity, nonviolence, all these lovely values, in theory, you could attain a kind of Christ consciousness. You could attain God union, divine. It doesn't really matter what you want to call it. The Kriya yogis are very anti-semantic. Like, call it what you like. Like, we have a history, obviously, and we have Sanskrit words, but it doesn't matter. They're not married to a word, and they're very much just about wanting people to practice by these things, because in essence, really, if you live by these principles, you're just being a good person. You're just being a kind person who meditates and makes an effort to be compassionate and aware. And that's where I always try to ground my preaching around this stuff. I'm like, I don't need everyone to be me and like being like I'm in devotional love. I wake up and I like cry. I pray to these figures and these guys, and that's me. I'm crazy. I don't need everyone else to jump in on my bandwagon. But what I hope is that if we can just extract the surface, if I can at least present the logic around the practices, it can connect with people in a meaningful way. But what I mean, sorry to rant a little bit, but
No, as a matter of fact, I really love that, because it's essentially the same approach or the same principles that I hold myself to, which is that I will never impose any of the modalities of self-inquiry or discovery that I take on. At first, when I was very excited about the gene keys, I would sit down to have a session with somebody and would immediately say, let's look at your profile. And I immediately learned that this is something that you really have to move forward from your own inner drive and volition.
yes,
And that's the only way. It's a path of contemplation, and you need to make peace with the fact that it might be a journey that takes the rest of your life to unfold, and it's one that you can only turn the pages by yourself.
yeah,
And
dude,
you can
amen.
always consult other people who have had their own experiences to find comfort or to compare, but we have to always remember that that comparison is in fact the thief of joy, and the joy really lies in the patience that you unlock by finding peace with doing it yourself. It's really only the mental plane where we can share useful tools and resources to take our own inner journey deeper.
Dude, absolutely. Until you know what, until you get to a point where, and I really believe like people like yourself, perhaps even I, are getting to a point where like eventually actually believe you can like sit in presence with people, and just being in their presence, you can fundamentally take something away from it. And like I've had those moments with other people on spiritual paths of their own, and I'll like spend time with them, and a lot of time it's like we're not even saying anything. We're just like looking at each other, and by the end of it, I'm like, man, I just learned a lot. Thanks. And it's like I really believe in that stuff. But yeah.
No, without a doubt. In the same way that our voices create a vibration on the airwaves that our ears pick up, our hearts do the same through the electromagnetic connection that we make. And that is communication as well. In fact, it's a purer form of communication because there's less room for misinterpretation.
That's it, because language is always going to be, language always has meaning attached to it, and it's symbolic in nature. Words stand for something else. And the way that I've understood word is always going to be mixed by the way that I've heard that language used. You know, there's a reason why I swear all the fucking time, and I don't have a grievance towards it, because swearing was very colloquially used, and in the music it was lighthearted. But you know, I use that language around other people that feels like an attack, because the only way they've ever heard that is in insults. So, you know, and even just in that basic example, language is not clear. It really isn't, especially like the way that we've constructed it.
Precisely.
So what the heck got you into all this? Why are you doing this, Nick? Why do you care? What got you into the self-contemplation? Did you hit a low point in your life and then you're like, I need to get out of this? What got you to here?
Kind of. Yeah. I say that I started asking the big questions in life really early on, which put me on a kind of fast track to beginning to find answers, or perhaps the lack thereof. And the reason that I started asking these big questions about life is, well, not only because I'm a line 6 in the gene keys, and so I think very big picture, and I'm curious about what's going on in the in the universe at large and how it relates to my very small existence, at least relatively on the physical plane. But what happened was that about a month before my 13th birthday, my dad was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, at the dawn of my manhood, I no longer had a father figure. And what I had been taught to be so proud of, my Mexican heritage, my bridge to that side of my family was dissolved and no longer existed. And so I found myself very lost, still, of course, cradled by my absolutely amazing, deeply loving mother and the rest of my family. I had an incredible support system, but that doesn't change the way that you have to grieve and face the massive reality that we confront on a daily basis and the insanely wide spectrum of potential that's available to us, to the high and to the low. And so I started with the low, and that, I think that night that happened, that was the first time that I ever had a spiritual experience, because in my just fear and confusion, I was 12 years old. I like sat outside on the driveway because I don't know why, but it was under the nearly full moon. And for some reason, the purity of childhood is so beautiful in that you don't question whether what you're feeling like doing is right or wrong or real or not, or magical, or if magic even doesn't exist. It's you don't ask those questions. So I talked to the moon as if it were my dad, and I felt as if there was this connection between my soul and his. And I didn't even have these concepts of a soul or a spirit or the aura or the collective unconscious. I just was connected to it. And from that moment on, the rest of my life, I kind of went on a journey, and I went about as far away as you can get from that intuitive spiritual moment that I had. And then I've come all the way back since.
Wow, I'm tearing up a little bit, man. That's fucking. Firstly, wow, what a trauma. I'm so sorry that you lost your father at such a young age. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. So, wow, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Uh, but it also comes, honestly, Nick, what's twisted at this point in my awareness is that doesn't surprise me at all, because there is something fundamental to the awareness of suffering that can create moments of awakening within humans. In fact, I remember there's a story in Kriya Yoga around Babaji, around like that Christ-like figure I mentioned, and they're like, well, how did he become so enlightened? And apparently it's because when he was a newborn baby, his mother tried to kill him, or like she was choking him. And apparently his consciousness was already so evolved that his awareness understood at that young of an age, newborn, that he would have to unconditionally love his mother, even though his mother, obviously had her issues. And in that moment, he had his awakening. Like, he was pretty much born, his mom tries to kill him, he has an awakening. And it seems like every single person I talk to on this path, or that finds themselves in this kind of leadership role, there's an experience with intense suffering that brings about a kind of, and I guess you can even say very rationally it makes sense. It's like, yeah, because you're confronting the concepts of death. You're confronting concepts that are always abstract for most people, and you're doing it at such a young age during the formation of ego or self or conscious or psyche rather, that it then, I guess, opens you up to that like realm, like you said, like now you're in communion with the moon, and the moon is your father. And it's like you say that, it's like when you say this stuff, I'm like, yeah, literally that's very real. That could exactly be it.
You made a post recently about the paradoxical nature of reality, and you said, I'm not going to go into it now, but and I think we've immediately arrived at something that we share as a very fundamental peace-giving universal truth, which is that there is always a paradox to the zenith of truth that can free you. And in the darkness, in the wound, in the trigger lies the teacher. And that's absolutely true. At the same time, life always tends to give you a free sample. That's what I call it. And then it asks you to pay. It asks you to earn whatever it is that you get to taste for free.
Yeah.
This happens in relationships. We call it the honeymoon phase. This happens in every part of life. And for me, it happened primarily with a beautiful relationship that I had with my father. And I never got the chance to really grow up and befriend him man to man, but I got a taste. And he taught me so many incredible lessons that provided the sort of it planted the seeds for the hope that I needed. But then life tore him away from me and my family and asked me to earn it. And so in that moment, that's this sort of full trust, free sample, speaking to the moon in the most uncertain moment of my life to date. I also, like I said, went on a journey as far from spirituality and trusting life as possible. And for the next maybe 10 years, I didn't trust life at all. And trusting life is what spirituality is to me. I mean, that is what purpose is. That is what this whole thing is for, is how can we learn to trust this experience and then allow evolution and the impulse of progress and growth and connection to push through us, express itself through us. But the thing is, for anybody listening, you have to understand that the farther you go down the well into the darkness, the farther you will be able to reach into the light when you do find your way and your ability to climb out.
The question then here, the nuance of this question is, okay, but then what about people who they hear your story? Okay, that's great for you, Nic. I'm like, you went through something that pushed you through this point. Now you're here and you went into the darkness, but I don't want to go into my darkness because it hurts me, and or you're also at this point now where you're talking about trust and letting go and flowing with spirit. I can't trust. I've been through things that have hurt me fundamentally, and these experiences have taught me that people are bad. How do you reconcile, people who are holding on to the narrative of pain and that, because let's say they might have also experienced severe trauma like yourself?
I'm so glad that you challenged me with that, and I would love to hear your response as well. But the one that I have comes from the years of experience that I've built up trying to motivate people in order to inspire them to start their journey or deepen their journey or build up a greater inner fire to pursue what they're capable of and their potential. But if I've learned anything, it's that there are enough motivational, inspirational quotes and videos. And I think the truth of it is that everybody has a jar to fill with wasted time. And everybody's jar is a different size. And some people, maybe it might be like one summer in middle school, and they just like throw it away and don't do anything. And then they kind of wake up and they're like, oh my God, I'm alive and I'm wasting this time. And their jar is full. And then they realize the value of every passing moment. They realize that their time has come already and it's flying by. The sand just, dropping through the hourglass. And some people have jars that are about the same size as their whole life. And they will remain in the state of waiting, hoping, perhaps even praying, perhaps even resisting or reacting to what has happened to them without realizing that you can't change what you don't own. And if you don't take responsibility for what has happened to you and your ability to access a higher plane of being, of a deeper sense of joy, then, and if you don't start building that for yourself, then you won't. And no one, no matter how much they inspire you or how many motivational posts you save on Instagram, can actually change that for you.
How fucking dare you tell people to take responsibility for something they didn't do to themselves? And that's going to always be what people who are stuck, like you said, filling that jar, that will always be their philosophy. And like you said, we can do what we can to provide better alternatives, which we think are better, because I think our lives serve as living proof as to why these different philosophies or applications, aka taking responsibility, even for the things that it's like you were a kid and your father died in a tragic accident and you took responsibility of that.
It's not that I'm responsible for what happened or what happened to me. It's that you're responsible for fixing it. You're responsible for either reacting for the rest of your life and getting trapped by the way that your nervous system automatically reacts to something that you're not equipped to handle. or you can respond, but you can only respond with maturity and acquire the wisdom and change what you want to change and improve if you first take responsibility for fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche, I'm paraphrasing it terribly here, but he said something along the lines of, maybe it wasn't even Nietzsche, but
You
there's
say it, I'll
an
probably
idea that it's something along the lines of a man must be responsible for everything he does and everything everyone else does.
I think it is Nietzsche, or it might be one of the existential guys, Dostoevsky. I know Jordan Peterson quotes that a lot.
Yeah, it's either Nietzsche or Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky, I think it might be Dostoevsky.
Like
Yeah,
I said, I stopped reading philosophy because it was too much to chew on.
It is a lot
Not very
to chew
tender
on.
meat.
No, it's the kind of meat that sent me into depression when I was 18 years old. But you know, you asked me, so I'll respond. What would be my answer to that? I think my answer lies in my life. I was the victim. Like my own little story of pain. It's like when I was 13, my grandma took her own life, and it was like very we didn't talk about it. My family didn't know how to talk about it, and I hold no resentment towards my parents. It was my dad's mom. He didn't know how to talk about it. He wasn't educated in, you know, his own emotions. My mom definitely wasn't. And then my aunt was murdered when I was 15 years old. My aunt's sister, and it was, I mean, my mom's sister. That was another tragic loss that, again, my family didn't know how to really talk about. And then I was using, like, you know, a lot of drugs as a teenager. By 21 or by like 18, my best friend has a psychotic break, and he just, like, unfortunately loses his mind. Like his, yeah, like you couldn't really recognize him. Within a couple of years, he dies and he overdoses. And suddenly my best friend, the only, like, because I didn't have maybe the best relationships at that time, my best friend's dead. I'm in this story of like, oh, everyone I love and care for dies. Fuck life. Everything's against me. I should just do drugs, fuck bitches, get money. Like, that is the mentality I'm holding, because in some, there's, you know, there's a multitude of factors. From, firstly, I'm being told this world's highest goal is money. Getting lots of women is cool. I'm being told that being Colombian and a minority and being bi and all these things make me a minority, and I'm internalizing these things going, yeah, it's so right, I'm so oppressed. But then, ironically, I actually had my initial awakening at 18, because these two beautiful souls slapped the shit out of me. Where in the Paris attacks that happened, like where there's a bombing, this father and son duo released this video, and they're forgiving the terrorists that killed their wife and mother respectively. And the level of empathy these two are showing for the murderer of their, you know, their wife, their spouse and mother, and the dad's going, I know that whatever young man did this, like, he was brainwashed. This is an ideology. This was not them, because at the core of a person is good. And I'm watching this video, 18 years old. I'm a victim of the world, even though I'm in the university. I have two parents alive. I have like two brothers. I have so much to be grateful for. And it kind of like, it opened me. It was kind of this big realization of like, what the hell is wrong with me? There's something going on with me, because my story is not that bad. Like I got some things. Sure, let's acknowledge our trauma. Let's work through it. Let's, no doubt, I'm not a denier. I'm not a spiritual bypasser. But it kind of became very apparent to me. Wait a sec. Like, I think I'm in control of this thing. I'm pretty certain I have created a narrative. And it was just around that time where I was reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, and it was just a few things happened in alignment, such that the idea of suffering, I realized, was always my idea. Like, you objectively experience things, but those things, the suffering actually doesn't continue that long. Like, we create the suffering after a while. Like, things happen, oh yeah, and they continue to happen. My life, even this past summer, super sad. My cousin shot himself in the head. Like, terrible things happen, and they suck. And I am not the guy who will tell people like, those things don't matter. They do. But like, I'll be honest, like, I live presently engaged right now, and I'm like, those things don't actually weigh on me in the way that you might imagine. In fact, having gone through the, like you said, the process of like really confronting the darkness, are what's now given me the kind of like gratitude, happiness, compassion, empathy, all the most wonderful things that maybe I was lacking when I was growing up in indulging in the narrative of pain, are the very things that I've gained tenfold because of the pain. And it's like, oof, it's a little masochistic, it's a little paradoxical, like you said, but it's just the fact of my life. Now, again, I think you and I share that philosophy of not trying to push so much, but I do have to preach a little bit and go, hey, dude, I'm fucking living proof. Living in a narrative of pain, attaching yourself to an identity of pain, firstly, even having an attachment to your ego. All of these things are recipes for suffering. And trust me, I have abused drugs for years trying to look for an escape. And this is something I told my friend like 2 weeks ago. I said, I tried drugs my whole life looking for joy because I lost it somewhere along the way in that like pain and those stories. Now I have it every damn day, and it's so frustrating because I really thought I was going to find it somewhere outside of myself. But it was always kind of there. It was always there. And that's, I guess, the profound, oh, God was always within you. It was always here. We were already always enlightened. And the true spiritual growth is not so much getting the answers from outside of ourselves, but letting go of the shit that we think that we know about ourselves, about our life. And the more you let go, and like you said, you surrender your attachment to a purpose, and you find your purpose.
It's really important to decide if you're going to let life crack you open or not.
Yeah.
Do you want to be open or do you want to be closed? The choice is yours. Life is going to continue to apply pressure in order to try to crack you like a walnut. And you can decide that you're going to have a thick shell and resist that, but that's only going to increase the tension in your life. And the reality is that to exist as a human being is to experience that tension of existence.
Yeah.
We are right in the middle of the macro and the micro. We're right in the middle of the neutrinos and protons, neutrons, electrons, and the nebulas. And to be here in the middle is like to be like on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean, and all you can see around you is horizon, and you're just that little point of tension in the center where the wood is bound and glued to the sail, and you're just riding through. And life is going to have present you with good days, beautiful blue skies, clear nights, and sometimes there will be storms. And if you are not prepared to take responsibility for wherever you end up and the direction you'd like to go, you will just drift aimlessly. And so the choice is always yours. Yeah.
It really, like, it's so bad because I really do see people in moments of suffering, and I'm like, oh, like, I really feel for you. Like, I have the utmost compassion for people. Like, it's just, there just comes a time where, like you said, I'm like, oh, that's not suffering anymore. That's their choice. Like, they have built this. And it's so sad because I don't want to say that and make them feel worse. Like, I never want to make people feel worse. However, I have actually fallen into, because of my own life story, obviously I have my own biases. I go, oh, actually, sometimes when I see people suffering, I think, let them suffer, let them, because you actually let people hit rock bottoms. Sometimes that is exactly what you need to open the walnut, because sometimes, like you said about the jar, if we keep compassionately serving people's feelings to justify their feelings, we create an environment that actually never allows them to open the walnut, to confront the darkness. And in that state of comfort and complacency is like the worst poison, because it's just a whole life of miserable complacency. And I can't imagine anything worse than that, really.
Precisely. I think we're beginning to orbit around something that we touched on earlier that is actually one of the deeper discussions that we could potentially have, which is about how language is essentially the root of knowledge, of storytelling, of addiction to the story, and the way in which we drag the past and that heavy baggage of what has happened to us, and oh, poor me and my story, or even, you can trap yourself in the positive story as well. Forwards into the future, and that way nothing ever changes, and without change there can be no evolution. And that is all rooted in the way in which language teaches us to categorize and label and divide. And so if there is a negative experience and a positive experience, a good and a bad one, a heroic and an evil one, then you're always going to want one over the other. But
Mm-hmm.
the problem that you have is the problem that you have with having problems, always. And so until you struggle enough to realize that, and as the Gene Keys teaches us, to invite the shadow in for tea and sit with it and say, so like, welcome to my life. What do you have to tell me? Teach me. Until you reach that point and you make peace with that, and you first allow that shadow to exist in your life, maybe eventually you accept that it might stick around for a while. And after it does stick around for a while, perhaps you even embrace it because it provides you with the contrast that makes your life beautiful. You're going to remain in a state where you feel as though you're watching the sand drop through the hourglass, and your jar is never going to fill enough with wasted time that you realize how valuable it has been the whole time.
We talk about language and the dualistic nature of language in which it traps us. Well, I mean, it traps the mind, which obviously, for each individual, simulates our understanding of reality. Let's get into that. Alan Watts talked about it once, how the English language especially doesn't allow things to just like exist. Like it always has to. It sets up a creator, like there's a noun and there's this. Like you can't just have the tree can't just be treeing. Yeah, the tree can't treeing. It has to stand. The tree stands tall, and the structure of the language always separates the thing from its existence. That's why it presupposes, like the structure of grammar within English suggests the existence must have been of the universe must have been created. It doesn't allow for this like idea that actually,
as a matter of fact, the nouns are the verbs. There's no
yes.
difference. Yet the fact that we have different ones is a convention for us so that we can separate and categorize our reality. But the truth is that we are beings that are human.
Yes.
Human. and such is the same with all the things that think. I've listened to several hundred hours of Alan Watts, so
Dude,
be prepared. Yes. But there's something you said a moment ago, which I think is a nuance that I'd like to present that I haven't heard anywhere else on the internet, which is that everybody says let go, and it's important to let go. And that'll get you there, but it'll only get you far enough that you eventually confront yet another challenge, which is to let go so much that instead of letting go, you just let be. And to let go is to kind of
reject,
cut off, separate, create a distinction, and I don't need that. And there's this disidentification with it. There's this identification with disidentification that can be one of the ultimate hideouts or traps of the ego. And so it's important to let go only to the extent that allows you to let be, whatever be may be. And you can allow yourself to be fully attached and identified, or have your expectations, have your desires, your cravings. Let yourself be innocently human, but also realize that like whatever happens, you must allow it to be. And it's actually much more fun to live a life in which you have all of these human qualities that we might want to let go of spiritually in order to attain some enlightened load where you enlighten yourself by dropping your baggage. But letting be and letting yourself be attached to the things that you are naturally is actually the best way to be yourself and to be in harmony. And to be in harmony is to be clear and at peace in the expression of your purpose.
Yeah, see, in Kriya Yoga, there's this philosophy that while the God is the omnipotent, the omnipresent thing that is divinely expressed in everything within the universe, well, then that would suggest there is an individuality aspect. Within the philosophy of Kriya Yoga, you as an individual, sure, you are but a reflection of the infinite creator, but you're an individual expression of that infinite creation. And it's not, like you said, it's not about becoming a renunciate and like, oh, I now have nothing and I'm nothing. That often actually comes from a place of neurosis, and that's actually coming from someone who's just so attached with letting go because they don't want to confront, like you said, the darkness, the things that do make up their unique individual expression of God. And I love that because you're right. I do meet a lot of people who jump into the spiritual journey, let's say, and I go, oh, this is a neurosis for you. This is another escape for you. This is another place for you to escape, my friend. And it's not and it's a good one because you can really cleverly use the language within spiritual mystical worlds and go, oh, I have no ego, I have no this, and I'm like, oh God, no, you are just so running away from yourself, man. Like, you know,
The truth is that the ego can be a whole lot of fun when you
yeah.
don't tie yourself to the ship that's sinking.
Dude, it's like the way I think about my ego. I'm like, well, this is actually again very much aligned with I've become very Kriya. It's like the avatar doctrine. It's like an avatar. This is a you are God, right? But you're being expressed in this thing. And even within Kriya yoga, they don't like demonize the ego, and like a lot of people might. It's like, no, the ego's a thing. It can help you relate your story to other egos' stories, but it is just an ego game. Like the ego isn't wholly you, but it is this projected, created thing, and it to hold it with a bit of humility and grace, and acknowledge that at the end of the day, you will be perceived a certain way by people, and it's good to be mindful of that and stuff, because if you become so I have no ego, that's the kind of condition where you could be such a fucking asshole, and you've convinced yourself, oh, I don't have a persona. It's like, yeah, because your persona's a dick and it doesn't even see itself anymore. It's good to have an idea of the sense of self that you've projected
Absolutely.
onto the world.
Absolutely. You know, there's a thought experiment that I ask people quite often, which is fascinating and challenging. That is, I think, one of the best spiritual tests or ego tests. And it's, what would you do if no matter what happened, failure was guaranteed? People love asking the question, you know, if money was no object, what would you do? And that just gives your ego full reign to express itself unconsciously. But what if, no matter how deeply you wanted to do something and be good at it, you couldn't? The only outcome would be that you could try, but it's going to be bad. What would you do then?
But I feel like the life I chose was statistically the one where I was most likely to fail, to be honest. I was like, I really want to be an artist in every way, shape, or form, and kind of just, yeah, maybe like a spiritual artist. It's like, that is guaranteed for failure. Yeah, that's the one I want.
and when you recognize that that is kind of your worst case scenario, other than the atrocities and actual wounds that can occur to your physical vessel and that kind of damage, if you're just going to be bad at everything for the rest of your life, then your ego is going to have to die into being bad, or you could fight it for the rest of your life. And a lot of people will say that. They'll say, I would probably just go into the woods and meditate and wait for my life to end. And to that, I say, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's
my
right.
answer is to just do the same things that I want to do anyways, but
that's
be
it.
bad at it. And maybe I wouldn't have a job or like be able to make much money, but in that case, I would probably walk to Mexico, trip on my shoelaces quite a few times on the way there, end up at a beautiful beach, because you can't be bad at being at the beach. And I would probably just be a bad like taco chef and a bad surfer and just make peace with it.
I think
that the magic of learning to let it be instead of let it go allows you to access what I think is the ultimate, at least what I believe is, what I hope is my ultimate spiritual desire for reality, which is that nothing changes, but that everybody finds peace with that nothing needs to change.
Yeah, because I mean, this is a good little segue into a cultural conversation. We do live in a culture that is so entrenched with the idea that everything in the world has to change. We need all the systems to change. We need everything to change. I can't be happy. I can't have peace unless everything changes. And I keep going, my friend, you're going to be waiting a long fucking time unless you want a radical like world revolution that destroys and kills billions of people. And if that is what you want, that's great. No problem. More power to you. But I don't like that idea so much. Maybe I'm just privileged and attached to the things of worldly desires, but I do think it's kind of crazy because, like you said, I'm like, there is such an easy route. I mean, maybe easy is not the most appropriate word, but there is a way, like you said, there is a path to find inner peace in spite of everything being shitty. Like there really is, and yeah, I think I mean, it's awesome that you believe that as well, because that's a huge. I do find myself sometimes in conflict. I don't know if in conflict, but in contrast to like the activist mindset, because the activist mindset is always, I can't be happy or content until the systems of the world radically change. And my approach is the systems of the world are just people, and they will radically change if you radically change yourself. You're the person you have control over. Change that guy. Watch the world change, you know?
There is also another kind of activism that is, if any division of that kind of desire to change the structures to improve the experience of the average person. It's like, in my mind, it's accelerationism, which is kind of like speed running all of the problems and the shadow work as a collective, and just kind of moving as quickly as we can and trying as many things and failing as much as we can, so we can learn as much as we can, so we can get to a better place as quickly as we possibly can. That's a whole rabbit hole, and the actual the nuances of that ideology can get quite crazy and perhaps even extremist, but that's the fun of it all. Accelerationism.
I wanted to talk a little bit about relationships, because I'll be honest, I think this is like, if I can be honest to my viewers and people listening, I think relationships are something that I've struggled with, yet I've also excelled at. Like, I've had many opportunities to be in them, and I've loved them, and I've loved these women, and for the most part, I'm in like good terms with most of them. We found our peace in spite of the fuck ups that we've all engaged in. But I still find myself, and I wrote a poem about this, like I praise the idea of marriage, but I still fucking am terrified at the idea of commitment to someone, because for me, I'm like, I've seen how much I've changed so rapidly in the last 7 years that I go, I don't know if I can promise myself to someone. I don't know if I could commit myself to someone. But you seem to be in like this beautiful union with your partner, Bella, and like you guys are so outwardly committed to each other, at least, or at least willing to put your relationship online and share that. How did you find that kind of grace and confidence in your relationship?
We earned it. Life gave us a free sample, as it always does, and then it took it away, and then in came the challenges and the karmic work that is required, and we rose into love. I mean, at first you fall in love, and you kind of fall down into the well of darkness, and you got to climb out together. I'm taking a look at your Gene Keys profile here behind the scenes, and
I love it.
You mentioned the romantic relationships being something that has just been a little bit chaotic or turbulent in your life, and I don't actually see any line 2 in your profile. There are 6 lines in the Gene Keys, and each one represents many different things. Each one kind of stands for a different archetype, but line 2 represents the primary romantic relationship in your life. You have line 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Isn't that funny? I have this deep-rooted sense that I'm meant to be alone.
And so, yes, but it's not true, because the things that are not included in your Gene Keys profile are the background that will give contrast and bring the rest of your life into focus.
Wow.
And so your 2 primary spheres that are the doorway into your profile and into your evolution and your health and eventually your purpose, the 2 names of these spheres are the same for everyone: your life's work and your evolution. And the connection between these 2 is the pathway of challenge. And yours is line 1. So that means that your life's work and your evolution and the challenge that you face in evolving into the version of yourself who is capable of fulfilling your life's work is going to primarily require you, in order to serve yourself, empower yourself, and cultivate your relationship with yourself, so that you can step into the full acceptance that you can transcend this as the creator of your reality. And then in contrast to that, the other 2 spheres that I'm looking at in the activation sequence, there are these 4, are the radiance, which represents your health and what allows you to shine and extend your aura out into the world and connect with the processes and challenges that are right for your evolution. And then purpose. Those are connected through line 3. And line 3 represents the family. And so I have heard a little bit about your story and the experience that you've had growing up, and the just a very glean of the surface of your experience in your family. But that's the deeper spiritual initiation that is going to, and likely has already based on what I know about you, throttled you into a deeper questioning of your relationship with yourself. And the contrast between these two things is, of course, what arrives in the middle in line 2 as romantic relationships, the background that I talked about.
Whoa. So dumb it down for me a little bit. Is that a suggestion? I mean, from what I picked up, it's like I have to, I mean, not have to, but a lot of my, whether or not I end up in like a successful romantic relationship is really going to depend on my ability to come into my life's purpose in a lot of ways.
What are you asking exactly?
Like, is that what the gene key is showing? Like that like I have to, that I'm somebody who like the romantic aspect of it will show up more fully if and when I'm able to meet my life's purpose more effectively?
That's a question that only you can discover the answer to.
That's what I feel, to be honest. I felt it for like like the last year. I actually ended things with the person I was seeing because I knew I had to be alone, and I like told them, and it was like this, like it wasn't like any bad blood. I felt this call towards what I call God. It doesn't, again, people have their own words. And the moment that I did, that's when my Kriya yoga journey began. And I it became reignited. Paramahansa Yogananda found his way into my heart. And it's like, I feel very, 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 very called to like a spiritual path. And sometimes I think, it's not that I think I'm going to be celibate and never have a partner, but just that right now, it's just like it's not what I'm being asked of. It's not what God's asking me to do right now.
So the truth of that is that the answer to that question does not lie in what I was just discussing, which is really only the portal into the deeper contemplations accessible to you through your Gene Keys profile. There are 3 different sequences or pathways. There's the activation sequence, which has to do with your outer expression of creativity through your life's work and the challenges that you face in wrestling with that and the outer world. Deeper, though, there's the Venus sequence, which has to do with love. And then deeper than that, the Pearl, which has to do with prosperity. But that middle sequence, the Venus sequence, that's the one that'll really sweep you off your feet and take you for a whole whirlwind romance with your own mind and spirit. And so I'm looking at it here, and the deepest layer of all of this is known as the core wound or the vocation. And it's the doorway into your prosperity sequence. So it lies at the very end, or if you'd like to call it the beginning of your profile. And your Gene Key 46, line 6. But the shadow, and that's what I really want to hone in on to bring it to your awareness, is seriousness. Because I hear in your story that you shared with me about letting a person go that you wanted to take yourself seriously and you wanted to do it by yourself. And if I can guess at all, I would assume that you were kind of observing yourself from this macro, big picture, bird's eye view kind of perspective. And you saw, okay, if I'm going to unlock my life's work and evolve and fulfill my purpose eventually, I need to be alone and spend time with myself. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So the gift of seriousness requires you to take your life so seriously that you remember to not be serious at all, because you're letting it be instead of letting it go, and that you arrive at a place of delight no matter what happens. The city of that core wound, the deepest layer of your heart in your incarnation in life, is ecstasy.
I used to take that a lot.
And that's the joke I was just about to make, which is so funny because there is this paradoxical beauty to your story that we're accessing already through the Gene Keys, which is that at the very deepest layer of your heart, you are designed to experience ecstasy through the delight of being. But you can only access that by bringing it so down to earth that you forget about all of the observation and mindfulness, and that you just feel fully the pain, the tension, the heat and cold of what it's like to be yourself and to take life seriously.
Hell yeah. Dude, this is so crazy because literally the other day, I'm literally like in my kitchen and I'm like, I had just finished the autobiography of a yogi, and I'm sitting there crying, laughing to myself, going, it's just like the joke comment that I told you on your page. I was like, it's just like a big joke. And this is funny because I'm God and we're God, but he thinks it's funny and I think it's funny. And I'm like, and there was like this, like you said, like this kind of like, oh, if you just let it be, baby. Like I don't know, like this is a little personal, but like really within the last, like, I'm not kidding, last like week has been a transformational re reawakening, I guess, like where, you awake, you start learning whatever, but you become rigid in your own ways always, your mind thinks it's got it settled. But like this week, well, I mean, I guess maybe this month, but this week has been crazy. And even that partner I was talking about, we spent some time yesterday, and we were just hanging out as friends, and she's like, there's something different about you, like and I was like, really? She's like, you're still you, but like you're just, there's something about you. And I said, can I tell you a secret? She's like, yeah. I was like, I feel it too. Like it's like I've stopped trying to control this thing that I was like you said, like, I needed to be alone. I need to these things I have to do to figure this thing out. It's like, no, no, no. I'm figuring it out because I'm stopping. I mean, this is the language I use just because maybe I'm kind of raised a Catholic, so I still have this language. I go, it's like I've given my life and I put it in the hands of God. My life is in the hands of God. And now the irony of that is I'm now getting all the things that I wanted, so to speak. Like all the things that you aspire in your desire to control, you get when you surrender your desire to control. And again, that's back to the paradoxical nature of the universe. And I really, I believe it wholeheartedly. I'm like, the more that you like can play with yourself, and I mean that with, with the state of being, the more joy is coming in. I'm really beginning to feel that, Nick. It's crazy that the Gene Keys are saying the same kind of thing that I'm beginning to find within my experience. It's very, very reaffirming is
And
the right
again,
word.
deconstructing those concepts and allowing you to feel it fully and to open both your mind and your heart at the same time so that they can come together into an embodied understanding without the need to pin it down with words and to be able to explain it to anybody else. That's the difference between the Gene Keys and many other divisions of self-inquiry, especially, I mean, even astrology, which is another archetypal system, and the Gene Keys uses it to generate your profile. But because they are rooted in such ancient symbolism, they're a little bit more of labels as opposed to what the Gene Keys is more of it calls itself the book that talks to your DNA, because it is the most raw expression of the frequency of perception that is required in order to cut all of the noise out. But I'm happy that resonates.
Like a lot, like it's very, for me, this has been very synchronistic. I'm like, okay, nice, this is all very, it's like everything's coming together. But let's come back to you, Nick. Your story, I know that we kind of glossed over a bit of it, but what was the point from which you said, okay, I've spent the last 10 years anti-spiritual experience, I don't give a shit, to jumping in there? Because, for anyone who's listening, I think you can be an inspirational figure in a lot of ways. You have so much to your story, and in spite of the fact that we're here going, don't hold on to your narrative too much, there is some power when we can acknowledge the truth of yours. And what was the thing that then ultimately brought you back, I guess, into that self-contemplation? And was there any resources or anything that you would draw people towards beyond the Gene Keys, or perhaps just the Gene Keys?
Love.
Yeah.
I didn't really even discover the Gene Keys until just over a year or so ago, quite honestly. And when I did discover the Gene Keys, it completely swallowed me like a whirlpool and took over my life. So I spent, look at this thing.
It's crazy.
It's just completely full, highlighted in multiple different colors. But no, the truth is that what inspired me to rethink my persistent belief or claim that we were just living in a random universe and that God himself would never take the time to care about me, was love. And to humble myself a little bit, I spent the better part of my late adolescence very hopeless and disconnected. I had always wanted and deep down believed that it was possible for me to continue to have this relationship with my father in some way or another. And really all I saw, it was not some magical or inspiring spiritual message from beyond, but really just the dark parts of his karma that perhaps he never was able to fully unlock and burn up, manifesting in my life. And those qualities were, more than anything, chasing death, like to escape the pain and confusion of what it feels like to be lost, especially as a man in this contemporary day. I was running away from my problems, and in running away from your problems, you run away from life. And so I spent my teen years doing very dangerous things and risking my life, and the list goes on and on and on. Not just buying a fast car and driving it as fast as I could, but I mean, you only need to look at my previous career in extreme pogo sticking to understand.
You do backflips on pogo sticks.
But I also found myself in a relationship, and that was it provided opportunities for me to learn, but I wasn't ready to learn them. And I spent a lot of time resisting and rejecting the way in which life was trying to apply pressure and crack me open. And then I met Bella, and I was swept off of my feet with the kind of synchronicity that even the most resistant person that I was could not ignore. I mean, the numbers and the events are one thing, but I have it's crazy. I mean, it goes.
Tell us one. Sure,
on.
Give us one.
Okay.
One thing.
So, let's see. I am born on the same day as her dad. She's born on the 24th, which is a very significant birth date in all of our, both of our families.
Damn.
That's just a little bit of all of that. Bella and I are going to drop a podcast soon where we talk a lot about the synchronicity in the stories. And I want to keep a little bit of it a mystery, because in fact, she's writing a whole book that contains a lot of the details and magic that, I want to preserve. But love is the thing that inspires all evolution. It's it's the thing that snapped me out of not trusting life and required me to, if I wanted to get what I want, to trust that there was some force greater than me that had put this opportunity in front of me. And if I needed to cross that valley, I needed to walk on the bridge of trust. And so it's a rickety bridge, but and it's one that's quite high. It'll scare you to begin to trust life again, but life is going to give you that free sample, and if you want to earn it, you have to trust.
If there's one thing you could leave people here today so that they could, how might I open myself up to love? If that was a good, how would you answer something like that?
Don't wait for someone, specifically, don't wait for someone to come into your life. Begin with loving yourself, which might be a little bit easier, might be a little bit harder, depending on who you are and the stories that you carry with you. But you need to be your own first soulmate, regardless of when your actual soulmate shows up in your life. That is the way in which you earn that relationship with another person, is by inspiring one another and triggering one another to teach the lessons and learn the lessons from each other that allow you to love yourselves first, because it is the only way in which you can hold yourself accountable. When you end up depending on another person to hold you accountable to growth in a relationship, that relationship changes in nature, and you're no longer holding yourself accountable, which leads to crumbling of the foundations of your own individuality, which is what makes you so beautiful together anyway. So to love yourself, cultivate yourself, take yourself out on dates, treat yourself how you want to be treated, talk to yourself in the mirror, like dance through your life, sing
Yeah.
to yourself, really romance yourself. Uh, and everything else will begin to manifest from there, because you can either wait, and I was somebody who waited, and I got kind of slapped in the face, and it was a very rapid acceleration of a test, and you can do that, or you can start now and start slow and gently. But your life is romantic, and you need to romanticize it even more if you'd like. You're free to do so.
I love that. So from I think one of the biggest takeaways I can take here is I also, as much as what we said at the beginning might paint a kind of solemn picture around the jar, I actually think that I think both of us would probably agree with the fact that it doesn't have to be that way. Even if your life might right now might be on the path of you're going to spend your whole life and the jar is as big as your entire life, and you could, in my philosophy, or what I'm kind of beginning to prescribe to, is like you might have such a big karmic debt that if you never awaken, you spend your whole life in daydream, in a sleep, and that's the karmic debt of your life. And while that might be somewhat true, it doesn't have to be. Like, I do believe in the power of individuals to wake up from their own destiny in a way and then construct their own. And I think you would agree with that, right?
Without a doubt. I believe that the size of the jar that you need to fill with wasted time is equivalent to the volume, or maybe inversely proportional to the volume of your own self-worth.
Yes.
The larger your self-worth, the less space you have to fill with wasted time and regrets. And so the way in order to change your karmic debt, or to inflate your dharma and
Yes.
increase the like push away the horizons and increase the distance in which you can fulfill your harmony, is to increase your self-worth, because your life is always the equivalent manifestation of your own self-worth.
Yes.
You are living the life that is directly representing to you what you believe you are worth, and like that is what you do. And that's why love is the key, is to start loving yourself now, and to not wait for anyone else to drag you on into the magic, but to find that for yourself.
Beautiful. Well, that's Nic Patiño, a beautiful man, beautiful philosophy, giving you the answer. The key is love. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Niño.
How do I stop this recording?